Right, so I'm just going to do a voiceover for this. So we're just going to start with some, I think I'm using 800 sandpaper here, a bit of wet and dry, because the surface is quite good. So I want to retain that and just use that as a base. And I'm using a small wooden block here and keeping very square to the corners so as not to introduce any round edges. A little bit of soapy water, and yeah, we just keep going until we've got a nice flat surface. Now I'm just coming by hand just to go over the, now I'm just coming with a piece of Scotch-Brite, because the block doesn't get everywhere, and this just ensures that there's nice adhesion for the masking which is coming just now. So here I'm just checking that I've got no shiny patches. So I'm just drying it with a towel there quickly. And this is basically what you're looking for, a nice featureless surface with no shiny spots. These tuners will have to go because they don't hold tune. I'm going to replace them with one similar to this. So we need to close up the holes, because the new tuners only have one hole and none of these match. So I'm just going to put some super glue, some thick CA glue, on a cocktail stick, matchstick, cocktail stick. I'll press it in as deep as it can go. And I just carry on until I've filled up all the holes. Then we just come out with our nippers and just clip off the ends. These things are little missiles, so just be careful, wear some protective eye gear. I'm just sharpening the chisel now because I need to have a super sharp instrument to cut off the leftover super glue and cocktail stick. So holding the chisel flat to the surface, we just slice off what we don't need. Now with a block and some 800 sandpaper again, just going to flatten off all those bits in preparation for some primer. And it's very important to keep your block square to the surface. Don't sand with your fingers, because you'll never get it flat and you're going to leave wavy lines. I see a lot of guys that are doing this sort of stuff, they just sand with their fingers, and yeah, that's no good. Always use a block if you can. Here I'm just drop filling some super glue on all the chips, and that'll also ensure that none of the paint flakes off a little later. The super glue will go underneath the paint. And once again with a block, I'm sanding flat to the surface so that all my edges are nice and square and crisp. Use a round piece, some round tool if you need to. I've just clamped the headstock to the vise, and this ensures that I have a nice square, sharp corner. The same goes for the sides, using a block, just as we did in the back, and some 800 paper. It's time for masking now, so I'm using some automotive fine line tape here. It doesn't leave glue residue behind, and it bends quite nicely to some corners. Not all corners, you'll see when we come to the horn. There's a little trick that we do. But patience is your key, and a very keen eye. And you'll just notice how I'm holding the tape. I'm putting a little bit of pressure with my thumb while I'm holding the tape, and that prevents the tape from warping. So there's just a nice round corner to the tape, and just a little bit of pressure, tension, just to keep the tape nice and sturdy. So for this corner I'm just putting some transparent tape down, and I will cut that corner a little later with a very sharp scalpel. Here I'm cutting the very sharp corner with a fine sharp scalpel, and not too much pressure, just enough to break the tape. You don't want to be cutting into the paint if at all possible. The same goes for the sides. Just a bit of tension on the tape, and easy does it. Here I'm just closing the gap. I don't have tape that's thin enough, so I'm just using the fine line tape just to close the gap. A quick tack rag just to get rid of any dust, although we will be flatting this base color anyway, so it's not overly important, but needless to say, the less dust you have, the better. So the idea is to do 2 semi-dry coats just to give the paint some adhesion, and you can almost do these one after another because the paint dries pretty quickly, but you don't want to blast the paint on from the beginning. So just 2 dry coats followed by 3 or 4 heavy coats. Here I'm just sanding the primer away that we put where we closed up the holes. And you'll notice I'm using a block again. So we're sanding the black paint now. I'm just using a piece of Scotch-Brite because there was no dust or anything. So I just want to roughen it up really for the clear coat. There's no need to sand it completely flat. And I'm using a bit of sandpaper here just to nib the edges because I don't want any bumps when I put the clear coat on. So I'm very carefully just going around, just denibbing the edges. So this is what we're looking for. A nice flat featureless base, and as always preparation is key. So the better you prepare, or the better your prep work, the better the final result. So here's the first coat of clear. Again, just a dust coat. You'll see I'm going pretty quickly. I just want the clear to have something to tack onto. So I'm not pumping it on at this point. Just a quick dust coat, and you can just wait 3 to 4 minutes before you put on the final 3 heavy coats. Same goes for the body. Tack rag, highly important. Wear a mask. And here's the very first coat. It's just pretty dry, nothing spectacular, but still even. And quite a distance away, because I don't want the paint to be too wet at this stage. Here's the final coat of clear. You'll see I'm going much slower now. This is the 4th coat that I put on. So it was 2 dry coats, and sorry, it's the 5th coat, and 3 heavy slow coats, because I don't want to do a double clear coat, which means sanding everything down and doing another version. So I'm kind of pumping it on here, but I'm waiting 10 minutes before each next coat. The neck basically just needed some polishing. It needed no sanding or anything in between. It's quite a small part. So I'm just hand buffing it with some finishing polish. Here I'm sanding the body with some 1000, then 1500, and then I land up at 2000 before I buff. So the first round with a buffer, this is some finishing paste. It's not the bottle that's behind there, that's the final version. So I've just got a clean sponge, it's slightly damp, and I first let the finishing paste work its way into the little scratches, and what happens actually is the paint warms up and it sort of melds together. That's basically what happens. And of course the paste is also helping to smooth out all the scratch lines. So I'm just going very slowly, and you'll always notice that I'm going, the buffer is turning away from the edges, it doesn't turn into the edge, and that'll prevent the buffer catching on anything. And I just keep going slowly until the paste starts going dry, and then I stop. This is the final waxing. Now I'm using that liquid polish that's in the bottle, much finer than the finishing paste in the white tub, and this gives it its final sheen. Here's a close-up of the end result. I'm sure you'll agree that's quite acceptable for any guitar. Just sanding the old flaked gold off with a Scotch-Brite in one direction, and that'll give all the metal a nice brushed look. I did all the hardware this way. This and the screws I just gave a light coat of clear coat just to prevent any tarnishing later. Here I'm just rounding off the scratch plate. It was a bit sharp for me, for my taste. And also just cleaning any gunk off, and I'm just using a blade and just scraping along. I did first sand the radius in, but now I'm just evening it out with a blade. I went around the whole scratch plate like this. It's time to give a top a burnish, and I'm just using the finishing liquid that's in the bottle behind me, because the top was basically in very good condition. I didn't flat sand this at all. I just buffed it basically. Here's the final result of the front. I'm sure you'll agree it looks like brand new. I just finished up the back, soldered all the pots back, soldered all the pickups back, just closing up. I've sprayed the backplate, my vintage reborn backplate, with some bronze paint. So I'm just sanding the top off and sanding that flat, and then I'll just come with a permanent marker and just black out all the parts that I want black, and that will get 2 light coats of clear coat just to seal all that in. It's time for the final polish of the frets, because we've finished with all the handling and all the work. And this is basically just a dry buffing wheel. There's nothing on it. I'm just going over them just to give them like a mirror shine. Here I'm reaming out the holes for the new pegs. I did the first one and then I marked it with a piece of tape. So now I can just turn the reamer until I'm flush with the tape, then I know they're all the same size. Final fitting of the tuners after aligning them carefully. I pre-drilled some holes just to ease the screws in. Just checking that the new bridge fits. I did fit eventually still a Les tremolo, which is not pictured here, and I brushed all this hardware to match the pickups. I also changed the knobs, by the way. Yeah. So thanks guys, thanks for joining. I'm going to leave you here now with some samples. Please like and subscribe, and yeah, we'll see you soon. Thank you very much.